What happens when a lonely rancher desperate for companionship makes a shocking demand of his mail-order bride, only to discover something that changes everything? Witness this unbelievable true-inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The year was 1892, and the American frontier was a harsh, unforgiving place for those who dared to carve out a life in its remote corners. In the windswept plains of Montana, there lived a rancher named Samuel Hutchins, a man whose weathered face told stories of decades spent battling the elements, loneliness, and the crushing weight of isolation. At 53 years old, Samuel had spent the last 20 years alone on his sprawling ranch, with nothing but cattle and the occasional visit from a supply merchant to break the monotony of his existence. Samuel wasn't always alone. Years ago, he had a family, a wife, and a young daughter, but fever took them both during one brutal winter, leaving him with nothing but memories and an empty homestead that echoed with ghosts of laughter long silenced. For 2 decades, he convinced himself that solitude was his destiny, that he was meant to live out his days with only the wind in his thoughts for company. But as age crept upon him and his bones began to ache with the cold, Samuel realized something terrifying. He was growing old, and soon he wouldn't be able to manage the ranch alone. More than that, the silence had become unbearable. The loneliness wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It was eating him alive from the inside out. So Samuel did what many desperate men on the frontier did in those days. He placed an advertisement in a mail-order bride catalog, a practice that connected lonely settlers with women seeking new lives in America. His advertisement was simple and honest. Rancher, 53, seeks sturdy wife for companionship and help with ranch. Must be strong, willing to work, and comfortable with isolation. Weeks turned into months, and Samuel had nearly given up hope when a letter arrived. It was from a woman named Ingrid Larson, recently arrived from Norway. Her letter was brief but heartfelt. She explained that she was 28 years old, had lost her family to hardship in the old country, and was seeking a fresh start in America. She promised she was strong, hardworking, and unafraid of the challenges frontier life might bring. Samuel wrote back immediately, and within 2 months, arrangements were made. Ingrid would travel by train to the nearest town, and Samuel would meet her there. He felt a mixture of excitement and terror he hadn't experienced in years. Would she be repulsed by his weathered appearance? Would he be able to provide the life she hoped for? The day finally arrived. Samuel, dressed in his finest clothes, which admittedly weren't very fine, and rode his wagon into town. His heart pounded as the train pulled into the station, steam hissing and brakes squealing. Passengers began to disembark, and Samuel scanned the crowd anxiously. Then he saw her. Ingrid Larson was unlike anything Samuel had imagined. She stood at least 6 feet 2 inches tall, with broad shoulders, powerful arms, and hands that looked like they could wrestle a bear. Her face was kind but weathered, her blonde hair pulled back severely, and she carried 2 massive trunks as if they weighed nothing at all. She was, quite simply, a giant of a woman. Samuel felt his mouth go dry. This was his bride? He had expected someone, well, smaller, more delicate, more like the wife he remembered. But as Ingrid's eyes met his and she smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes, something in his chest loosened. The journey back to the ranch was awkward. Samuel tried to make conversation, but his mind kept racing with doubts and strange thoughts. What would the neighbors think? Not that there were many neighbors. What would their life together be like? That night, after showing Ingrid to her room, the small addition he'd built onto the house specifically for her arrival, Samuel couldn't sleep. Days passed, and Ingrid proved to be everything she'd promised in her letter. She rose before dawn, worked alongside Samuel without complaint, and handled tasks that would have broken most men. She could lift feed sacks Samuel struggled with, repair fences with ease, and even helped birth a difficult calf with a gentleness that belied her intimidating size. But something was bothering Samuel. Despite Ingrid's competence and kindness, he couldn't shake a growing suspicion. There was something about her that didn't quite add up. The way she moved, the way she avoided certain conversations, the way she never fully met his eyes when certain topics arose. One evening, after 3 weeks of this domestic arrangement, Samuel's suspicions reached a breaking point. They were sitting by the fire after supper, the awkward silence between them growing heavier by the day. Samuel had been drinking, not heavily, but enough to give him courage he wouldn't normally possess. He turned to Ingrid, his voice rougher than he intended, and said those words that would change everything. "Open your legs, let me see." Ingrid's face went pale. Her hands trembled. Samuel wasn't trying to be crude or inappropriate. His suspicion had grown into certainty. Something wasn't right, and he needed to know the truth. With tears streaming down her face, Ingrid slowly stood and revealed what she had been hiding all along. Ingrid Larson was not a woman at all. The person sitting before Samuel was a man named Lars Larson, who had been living as a woman to escape persecution in Norway and to find safety in America. The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel sat frozen, his mind trying to process what he'd just learned. All his expectations, all his assumptions, everything he thought he knew, shattered in an instant. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of rage or disgust, Samuel felt something else entirely. He saw the fear in Lars's eyes, the same desperate loneliness that had driven Samuel to seek a mail-order bride in the first place. He saw someone who had risked everything for a chance at a better life, who had worked harder than anyone he'd ever known, who had shown him nothing but kindness and respect. Samuel stood slowly, walked to the window, and stared out at the dark Montana landscape. After what felt like an eternity, he turned back to Lars and said something that surprised them both. "You've been the best partner I've had in 20 years. I don't care what's under those skirts. I care about whether you want to stay." And Lars stayed. Not as Ingrid the mail-order bride, but as Lars, Samuel's business partner, and eventually, his closest friend. They ran that ranch together for another 15 years, creating a bond that transcended society's expectations and limitations. Their story became a whispered legend in those parts, a tale of two lonely souls who found companionship in the most unexpected way. This incredible story reminds us that human connection can flourish in the most unlikely circumstances. If you enjoyed this tale from history, smash that like button, subscribe for more amazing stories, and comment below with your thoughts.